Rap news, street politics, the best hood channel on YouTube, and we back in them West Side 50s with Westtown Fido's Broadway Gangsta Crip. Now we know the city been going crazy with the homicides and the indictments in the streets. We've seen some high-profile murders take place at the end of the summer, and we see the feds still playing ball outside. Now, we talked about multiple federal indictments on this channel. We talked about when the feds put the squeeze on the A trays, moving from LA to Washington. We spoke on the 6-0s going down. And most recently, we all know what's going on with the Hoovers on Fig. But we gotta speak on when 72 people from Fido's Broadway went down in the largest blood or Crip federal indictment in LA at that time back in 2014. So around the same time that the feds was watching A Tray, they had their eyes on Fido's Broadway, where the feds alleged that Broadway was the hardest set in the Newton division over here by the Low Bottoms and South Park. Now, this was at a time when the Broadways were beefing with East Coast, and the feds had some snitches in the Broadways, giving them a front row seat to back and forth Hood Day murders, as well as the Broadway serving in the 50s and controlling Skid Row, along with them being involved in plotting on the Asians who was leaving their banks and getting robbed by members of Fido's.
How you from the gang and you ain't even hop the fence? Why you got that poem, you ain't even popping shit? Why? I be in the field and tripping off the opposition. Niggas want my spot and the crackers want me in prison. How you from the gang and you ain't even hop the fence? Why you got that poem, you ain't even popping shit?
Now with the Hood Day murders, like I said, most recently, we've seen it get cracking in LA, specifically with what happened on the A-Tray Hood Day, which of course has a direct correlation to the homicides that took place a couple weeks after the incident, where Africa and another man lost their life at A-Tray Hood Day party. Now we gonna break down exactly how these moves go down with people plotting on Hood Days and waiting for these Hood Days to come around, because this is exactly what Fido's Broadway was doing. And a lot of these hits do be happening in the Low Bottoms, because it's a lot of little warehouses that be down here, down Broadway and down Main Street. And this where the parties be cracking at.
Get your dusty ass in the car, little shorty. That's on God. Look how short you get. You need a booster seat in the front seat. Dead homies. You riding a leak.
But over the course of 4 years, the feds was watching the Broadways in an operation that they called Gremlin Ridaz. Now, if y'all not familiar with the Broadways, when y'all see them gremlins at the Hood Day and y'all wondering what that is, Broadway has specific cliques of gremlins. And it's really based on the generation of the members in the set. So we know the feds allege that the Gremlin Ridaz, a specific set inside of Broadway, was the hit squad for Broadway. But they also have gremlets, baby gremlins, different gremlin cliques inside of the Broadways, again, to represent generation. But the top 9 people hear about when talking about Operation Gremlin Ridaz is Tiny Ange. Now we're gonna speak on Tiny Ange, but we're gonna speak on how he was sliding and plotting on Hood Day murders, as well as how he backed out of trial on day 7 and somewhat left his homies out to dry while taking a plea deal and admitting guilt. Very similar to what Gunna did to Young Thug. And we see how that situation is playing out right now. And we gonna speak on the current status of Tiny Ange in his set. But like I said, with 72 people going down in this indictment, it was said that Fido's Crip had about 200 to 300 members all together in the 50s. This indictment swept up about 35% of Fido's Broadway whole hood. But we know it's multiple different Broadway sets in the city. 5 Deuce, 11 Deuce, and I heard a 10 Deuce.
I'm bailing on the block, I'm ducking punk ass cops. I'm really in the field, I'm trying to get me a knot. I've been thugging since a young and I've been walking this block. Spent some long nights thugging, sending bitches and throwing Glocks. The police hot, they're trying to get us for old cop, but I ain't going. I'm in the shootouts, I'm driving foreign, I'm switching lanes. Pray to God that I don't catch a case you niggas lame. Sweeter than some lemonade.
Now what we see with Broadway, with that many people going down in their hood, we don't see much of an online presence in the Westtown 50s. Now, in the indictment, we did see dudes like Woody pressing their homies about being online and being on Instagram and doing vlogs and shit on YouTube. So a lot of what you may see is from 11 Deuce, but 5 Deuce is still extremely active. But the key thing about Broadway right now is their political stance. A lot has changed for Broadway between the time period that this indictment took place to now. Like I said, 10 years ago, they was beefing with East Coast heavy, and there was a lot of murder beef to be had between both of them hoods. Now, as we see today, the truce between Broadway and East Coast has stood strong. We know East Coast has pieced it up with Florencia as well, so a lot has changed over here with hoods that beef with East Coast.
And it comes to a point to where it's like, enough is enough, like, because if it go on forever,
unless it was something that was just foul. You feel me? Now we're just full foul play. We can't come back from certain. You feel me? Like the homies was cool with the East Coast at one time. You feel me? But that's something that can never come back.
We ain't fucking with y'all. Y'all with us. We ain't gonna cause y'all no problems. Don't cause us no problems.
It's
no,
like that right now.
That's where it's at right now. You know what I'm saying?
That's how it is right now.
That's exactly how it is. That's why he like it's touch and go, because like if one of them pulled up right here right now,
a nigga wouldn't do nothing to him. And unless
he tripping, unless it's some type of animosity and we feel it. You know what I'm saying? If it ain't that, then he good. He come through, get his car washed.
Keep it pushing. Do what you do.
Keep it cool.
And we know historically, Broadway has got along with the Hoovers. Now, 5 Deuce Broadway and 5 Deuce Hoover definitely still get along. 11 Deuce Broadway still gets along with Hoover. But the thing is with 11 Deuce, they are also cool with Main Street. Now, this puts a wrench in the situation. We've seen some members from Hoover not feeling the Broadways rocking with the enemigos like that. Now, I don't know how tight they are with the main streets, and as we know, the main streets are extremely tight with East Coast, and we know what's going on with the main streets and the Hoovers right now. So we've seen the Hoovers kind of send subliminal shots at the Broadways, telling them not to come over into they set with that gangster shit since they want to kick it with the enemigos. So I don't know how universal that is between the Hoovers, and if that's specifically with 11 Deuce, since they do border the 9A main streets. But I do know all is good in the 50s.
Them on West Hoover, I swear to God, they just literally was making videos, and they put me in their video with bleak blowers. The police caught them.
Broadway niggas in the set.
Oh, free the Broadways, cuz.
Free the Broadways, cuz.
But the main beefs that still remain with the Broadways is, of course, the Denver Lanes. And I gotta give a shout out and say rest in peace to Peasy Dupree Moore, one of Broadway's young homies that lost their life last year out in Lancaster. Now, I'm not gonna talk too much about that situation, but I do know the PDLs and the DLs do beef out in Lancaster as well. But aside from that, they also beef with the BloodStone Villians. I've also seen them whacking out Hard Time Hustlers. Of course, they beefing with 6 Deuce Brims, and they beefing with the 40s. And in this indictment, I'ma speak about Tiny Choo being backdoored by his homies from Broadway, and Broadway trying to blame the rolling 40s for taking out their homie. Now, we know Broadway still a West Side hood, even though some of their hood bleeds to the East Side. So over here in the 50s, they going from Vernon and Slauson between the 110 and San Pedro, where they also function with the 5 Trey Avalons, and of course share that 4-pack beef with the Avalons, and they also kick it up at South Park with the 5 Trey Avalons. And around this time in the indictment, they was known to control Skid Row, Gladys Ave and 6th Street, Sarris Ave and 6th Street, Gladys Park. Broadway gangsters played a pivotal role in serving the streets in Skid Row. And that's a key thing about Broadway, what many people don't know about. Broadway is really known for getting money and serving. Of course, they get cracking, but they really known for getting money and serving. Now, their counterparts in 11 Deuce is gonna go from, I say, about Century to Imperial between the 110 and Main, with some parts bleeding towards Locke and San Pedro. But over here on Century and Main is where they border 9A Main Street. Just across the 110, the Hoovers is right here. The Q102 East Coast is also gonna be across Main Street, bordering the Broadways as well. And like I said, they are beefing it with the Hard Times right now. I don't know if that stands true for 107 Hustlers, but I do know the Hustlers have been losing ground in recent years. And then we also have T-Zone over here that has beefed it in the past with Broadway. Not sure if they still do, but they are a smaller hood over here, east of Main as well. But these are the territories that Broadway is controlling. Now in the 50s, Main Streets, of course, being 52nd, 53rd, 56th, 57th, all through the 50s, the Broadways have been known to have different dope spots between Broadway and Main Street. And we know how the feds do. They categorized everybody in terms of their position in Broadway, whether you was a shot caller, leaders of the Gremlin Ridaz, known for serving dope, sliding, flocking. They got it all, but the main people that they was focusing on was Lil C'Bone, Tyron Martinez, who they say was a leader of the Gremlin Ridaz, Tiny Looney, who was one of the dudes that Tiny Ange left hanging when he dipped out on him in trial, also known as the leader of the Gremlin Ridaz, as well as Big Sneak, Bear, and Big Toon. Now, overall, OG shot callers in the 50s, they focused on Woody, Big Rave, and Lil Rave. Lil Rave, Lord Kelly, was known to have what was called the White House, which was on 53rd between Broadway and Main. Now, the feds painted it out to make it look like the White House not only was a top spot where Broadway would conduct business, but it also served as an armory and a stash spot for guns and drugs in the West Town 50s. Now, like I said, there was multiple confidential informants from Broadway that played a pivotal role in bringing the feds to a front row seat into the organizational structure of Broadway. One of them dudes was actually from Gremlin Ridaz. Timothy Sawyer and his wife, Meme Sawyer, was a Gremlet. Both of these members was top members, and I would say without them, this case probably wouldn't be as strong as it was, because they wore multiple wiretaps in hood meetings, hood days, and everything that Broadway was involved in, whether it was murders, serving. As soon as they took place, these two snitches was going straight back to the feds and telling them everything. But the feds, we know, played a dirty game in this. They went back 27 years on the Broadways and tacked together everything that anybody from Fadu's Broadway was involved with from 1987 all the way to 2014. Now, like I said, that's a dirty game, man. Some of them dudes from the 80s probably weren't even still around when this investigation started up in 2011. But that didn't stop them from claiming 663 different overt acts or crimes against the Broadways that included murder, witness intimidation, robbery, and drug sales, all for the enrichment of Broadway Gangsta Crip. And they watched Broadway move packs from LA to Minnesota, Nevada, Louisiana, Colorado, and Ohio. But with the investigation starting in 2011, we know what brings these people out: the guns and the murders. October 2011, Hitman from Fadu's Broadway was killed on 56 in town. Now, this is borderline Fadu's Five Trey Avalon hood, and Hitman was a part of the Gremlin Ridaz.
I can't charge you to the game if you saw that nigga name, and if you just a homie, then we gotta take a friendly fade. The dead will be lurking before a mission, cause I done seen a homie transform into a gremlin on my Before you get in this car, know alright, we know alright with Blake. I ain't even gotta state the obvious, and I shouldn't even have to tell you not to switch, nigga, cause all my niggas politics. Flam on top, nigga, my gang go up, nigga, my gang go.
Now, after this point, the streets was buzzing, and Broadway came to the conclusion that it was the BloodStone Villians that took Hitman out over here on 56 in town. And at this time, on October 30th, 2011, right after the murder of Hitman, the feds turned their attention to Tracy Harris, aka Woody, who served as a true leader over here in the 50s. Now, surrounding this murder, Woody was already sitting down in the feds. He had 2 prior federal convictions before Operation Gremlin Ridaz in 2014. But on a jailhouse phone call, Michael Amos, aka White Mike, was caught on the phone talking about how Fadu's was ready for Woody to come home and take a leadership position to guide Fadu's in the right way. Woody accepted his role as a true leader, in which he was in the 50s, but he told White Mike that he did not want to be the face of the set to draw further attention to himself again. He was already sitting in the feds when Broadway was looking to lean on him for more structure and organization in the set. Now, at this same time, the feds were watching Lil C'Bone, who was the lead defendant on this case, and like they said, a leader of the Gremlin Ridaz. But what they informants was saying was that the Gremlin Ridaz was somewhat out of control, with dudes like Baby Ange committing unsanctioned murders and really just not following the rules. This is what led to people looking for dudes like Woody to implement structure into the set. But after Hitman was killed, the Broadways was looking to press play on the BloodStone Villains. And January 2nd, 2012, everything boiled over that involved 3 snitches who all played a role in the homicide. So confidential witness 16, who was a cooperating defendant of this case. Now, when I say cooperating defendant, this is somebody that went down in the indictment with the Broadways. YG Fly, aka Andre Williams. Now, this is somebody who played an interesting role in the Broadways. His whole family was from 40s, but he had 2 family members from Broadway and really wanted to be from Broadway because he was drawn to the money that they was getting off of serving in the 50s. So his cousins were Big Sneak, Anthony Woolley, and Fly, Christopher Burrell, both co-defendants in this indictment. And he went under his cousin Fly to be called YG Fly. Now, this is somebody who took the stand in trial against Tiny Ange, Tiny Looney, and Big Toon. Now, those 3 went to trial together, and Wody went to a separate trial. Only 4 members out of 72 took it to trial, and YG Fly ended up taking a stand on everybody. Not only that, he snitched on his cousins, and he pointed out leadership, Woody, Big Rave, and Bugs, as the ones that was running Broadway at the time. Now, the thing is, he took the stand and said he felt like an outcast. He didn't feel like he was a respected member of Broadway. He wasn't from Gremlin Ridaz, and since he wasn't known to slide or get cracking on enemies, he was only known for serving. He felt like Broadway treated him differently, in which they did. That's the crazy part. Other members of Broadway felt like he wasn't built for certain things like getting cracking, and he wasn't, which was fair to say. But he felt like favoritism was being shown to Gremlin Ridaz and not other members like him, which led to his jealousy and him not being respected in the set. Now, being a part of the indictment, he pled guilty to conspiracy to distribute crack cocaine and conspiracy to engage in racketeering. He was running multiple dope spots with his homies in the 50s, predominantly on 48th and 50th Street. He said Big Lee, amongst other members, was the one supplying him with his dope to run these spots. And he broke down how Broadway would use other females and other people to secure these apartments for them to trap out of so members wouldn't go down when the dope get kicked in. He also spoke on how the Broadways operated in downtown on Skid Row and how they would have to dress to fit in with the crackheads on Skid Row to not look out of place, to make sure all operations was running accordingly. This dude took the stand, told everything. Now, while he was hustling, he ended up getting into it with his cousin Fly because he wanted to make more independent money. He felt like he was always under the thumb of Fly from the beginning. Now, he said the Broadways considered him to be from 40s at first because all his family is from 40s. So instead of giving him a 2-man, they gave him a 3-man put on for 52 seconds to really test his heart. So he felt like he was behind the 8-ball from the beginning, so he says. But he falls out with his cousin and ends up trapping on 50th Street in his own spot, which takes us to January 2nd, 2012, a couple months down the line after the BloodStone villains killed Hitman. So he said that he's running the spot, and Tiny Choo, aka Aaron Shaw, is in the spot as well. At some point of kicking it on 48th, Aaron Shaw, again Tiny Choo, asked YG Fly to use his car. At first, Fly said no, but Tiny Choo talked him out of it, got the keys up off him, and dipped out. Now, when Tiny Choo comes back, he comes into the spot with F-Bone, aka Andre Griffin. And this is where these weird games start to come into play. And this shit really goes on in the hood, man, especially if you're not somebody that got some real rep and real respect. Niggas will play with you, and that's exactly what Tiny Choo and F-Bone did. So when Tiny Choo took the whip, not only did he meet up with F-Bone, he used YG Fly's car as a tail to go behind Tiny Crazy A and other members sliding to the BloodStone villains. And this is when they caught 18-year-old Edwin John Jr. on 53rd and McKinley in broad daylight. Now, 53rd and McKinley is still Five-Tray Avalon hood, but just past Central is the BloodStone villains. With the Broadways being cool with the Five-Trays, I'm pretty sure they had it in their mind that this dude was not from Five-Tray, so there would be no mistakes made in hitting one of their allies. And at this time, they get cracking on Edwin John, killing him by hitting him multiple times in the upper body, as well as shooting a 57-year-old man in the shoulder and shooting a little 11-year-old girl in the foot. 3 p.m., broad daylight on a Monday, they got cracking, January 2nd, 2012. Now again, Tiny Choo and F-Bone is in the tail car watching their homies get cracking. And that tail car belongs to YG Fly, who had no idea they was finna take his car when they left the dope house that day. And this is where a lot of bullshit started to go wrong inside the 50s. So they got back to 48, gave YG Fly back his keys, and was acting funny. He talking about where his car at. Tiny Choo told him it's down the street. He like, why is down the street? Tiny Choo initially told him that the homies had the car. You know, that's that funny shit I'm talking right there. You slide your homeboy the car, then you come back talking about you gave it to some other homies. Then he eventually told him that the car was parked down the street. They not telling him that they just laid somebody down on 53rd. You know, the thing was, nobody really trusted YG Fly. Everybody thought he was a sucker. And the crazy part is, at this time, before he took the stand in the trial, he was more solid than Tiny Choo and F-Bone. So he got a phone call from somebody on the block telling him that his car was parked funny, the windows was down, it just looked out of place. So he bagged up, closed shop for a second, because he was finna go re-up. He jumps out, finds his car on 48th and Grand, parked crazy, off the curb, all the windows down, the shit looking crazy. He hops in. As soon as he get in, the police get on his bumper, and he goes straight down. Now, everybody thought he was finna snitch. Again, this dude didn't even know nothing. The crazy part is, when he got in that room, he didn't say nobody's name. He didn't snitch on Tiny Choo, didn't snitch on F-Bone. He said he did not give his car out, and the police ended up letting him go. Now, you know, some shit like that, it's a lot of homies that's gonna be looking at you funny, and that's exactly what Broadway was doing because they considered him to be a rat. Now, Tiny Crazy A, who ended up going down for the murder as well, spoke with YG Fly in the county and told him that he had the paperwork, and he knew that YG Fly did not speak to them people when he went down after Tiny Choo and F-Bone damn near set him up with his car. But when he got out, Big Sneaks, his cousin, told him Broadway was ready to smoke his ass, and he told Fly that he should just move to Bakersfield. Fly felt like niggas was in the wrong. This is selective politicking. This is what all these people be talking about when they use that term, selective politicking. YG Fly was not a part of Gremlin Ridaz. He wasn't known to be a slider. He wasn't known to be with that business. So they counted him out and felt like he wasn't that solid of a homie to keep his mouth shut on the homicide. It turned out that he was, according to Tiny Crazy A, who went down for the murder. And this is what he said allegedly turned him into a snitch when the federal indictment came out, because his homies dirty politicked on him. And one of them dudes was Baby Dewey, who also went down for the murder. He was the one pushing the line, saying that YG Fly had snitched. It comes out with the paperwork that Tiny Choo and F-Bone made statements on they homies. They was in Fly tail car. Both of them dudes from Gremlin Ridaz made statements to the police, and this set Broadway all the way up. Now, Lil C'Bone, like I said, Tyron Martinez, who was said to be running Gremlin Ridaz at the time, he got the paperwork in his hands and he pressed the line. And he put it in his head that both of them niggas needed to be taken care of for talking to the police. But of course, when you got two members from the Gremlin Ridaz, a lot of politicking had to go on exactly what the punishment was going to be based on the paperwork. So F-Bone was said to have committed a more egregious act of snitching in the paperwork opposed to Tiny Choo, which is low-key crazy for F-Bone because he was known as a slider. So the feds also got F-Bone in another double shooting on East Coast back in 2006, where him, Tiny C-Bone, and Baby Ange slid into the coast and popped somebody in the neck and in the shoulder with a 9 and a shotgun. They didn't end up taking his life, but in the same night, they slid back to the coast and chased down somebody where they hit him in the leg. So to Broadway, this talking was uncharacteristic for F-Bone. They said Tiny Choo did not point out the shooter, but he did give official names of Broadway members to the officers. Not necessarily names that were implicated in the crime, but just spoke to police, period, and corroborated names to the police. F-Bone, on the other hand, told the police that Crazy A was bragging about killing Edwin John over here that resulted in that man and that little girl getting hit. And at this time, this is when they used their inside man, Tiny Sawyer, who was also a Gremlin rider and an FBI informant, to figure out what was really going on and what was Broadway gonna do in response to their homies telling. Now, Tiny Sawyer, who also went by the name Nephew, gave the FBI control of his and his wife's social media accounts and relinquished all information that they was getting from dudes like Lil C'Bone, Lil Rave, Caesar Mike, all other top G homies that were in control of F-Bone and Tiny Choo F-Bone. Now, the key thing is Nephew was already on parole when the feds approached him to become a rat. He got into some trouble and they leveraged the parole violation over his head. And this is when he made the move to bring him and his wife in to get some chili for snitching on their homies. And you know, everybody always say, all them snitches always say, I did it because I didn't like where the hood was going. I'm tired of the lifestyle, this, that. They had their reasons. But the key thing is, this nigga got paid between $80,000 and $90,000 from the feds for cooperating. And the key thing is, every time you give a piece of information or you do something, you getting a check. Wear a wiretap, you getting a check at the end of that. Wear a camera in the White House, you getting a check at the end of that. This is what made Nephew a lead snitch. And he took the feds with the audio recording inside of the meeting where deliberations were had on Tiny Choo's fate, which resulted in his DP. Now, the audio devices or the wires that the snitches go up in these meetings with is called an electronic surveillance evidence device. The reason the defense can't argue with what's contained on these devices is because once the FBI straps the wire to these people like Tiny Sawyer, the audio can't be deleted, muted, and you can't rewind it while you in the field. You have to take the wire back to the FBI and they process it. And this is why in the field wiretaps in these type of meetings was such strong evidence against the Broadways. So the feds had stepped in when they realized Lil C'Bone was plotting to take F-Bone and Tiny Choo out. They went specifically to F-Bone and Tiny Choo and told them their homies was finna take them out. F-Bone took that information. He know he did the bad work. He know he snitched. He knew his head was on a platter. This nigga ran to Vegas. Tiny Choo, on the other hand, opted to stay in the set. He felt like whatever he said to the police wasn't enough to get him put off the hood, let alone being killed by his own homies for what he said. This is when he went to Caesar Mike and other OGs in Phi Deuce, and they came down with strictly a DP. Now, when Nephew got into the meeting with the recording, all the Gremlin Ridaz was there. Tiny Ange was there, Lil C'Bone, and another unidentified male who wasn't labeled on the wiretap, but this dude was pressing for Tiny Choo to get a put off. Now, C'Bone had already expressed to Nephew and Deuce Pound that he wanted these two dudes gone, but in the DP, he was not saying too much, and he was letting the unidentified male kind of press the issue on getting Tiny Choo all the way out the hood. The unidentified male said, a violation is a violation. Regardless of how egregious the violation is, snitching has to be taken care of accordingly. No selective politicking. If F-Bone gotta go, Tiny Choo gotta go. And Baby Dice was brought up to be a snitch in this meeting as well. Now, Baby Dice, Travis Bryant, also went down in this indictment, but whoever this unidentified male was pushing the line saying Baby Dice had paperwork as well, and he wasn't trying to give no passes. Now, with Nephew being there, he was trying to play the role of the mediator. Everybody wanted to know what the OG said, and again, like I said, Caesar Mike only said DP. He didn't say put off. But the key thing is the unidentified male had got on Tiny Choo telling him that he had got kicked out of South Park because the Phi Tre Avalons had heard he had paperwork. So he said he wasn't good with the Avalons and he wanted to set the correct precedence with their allies in the Phi Deuce Hoovers and the Phi Tre Avalons to let them know that they're not breeding or harboring any snitches in they set. To me, it was a good argument. You got homies in your hood that got paperwork. Tiny Choo, of course, said he didn't get ran out of South Park. He said the Avalons was acting funny and he dipped. But either way, he had paperwork on his name. It should have resulted in a put off, and it probably would have saved Tiny Choo's life at the end of the day. But They opted to have a DP, and Tiny Ange, as well as a few other people, put the pause on Tiny Choo that day, serving him the DP for having paperwork in regards to the murder of Edwin John, which was get back on the BloodStone Villians. Now, there was a lot of scrutiny with Tiny Ange being a part of this DP. He was said to have been a part of a DP on a dude named K Ways, where he took it too far, and K Ways ended up hitting his head on the curb and having either a stroke or a seizure, which fucked him up permanently. And this caused the snitch Nephew to get into it with Tiny Ange. And he also got into it with Big Toon. Again, both of these dudes was on trial together. This is bad that you getting into it with an informant. He gonna want to take your ass out. And Nephew had already sold up Tiny Ange to the feds before this DP of Tiny Choo happened. Now, the murder on the BloodStone Villians took place again, January 2nd, 2012. They didn't DP Tiny Choo until December 2012. Earlier that year is when Tiny Ange and a few more of their homies started having them hood day murders with the East Coast. So after they got their get back on the Villians, they having a hood day in May. Now, like I said, a lot of these hoods, including hoods like how the A-Tray Hoovers just got here recently, had a hood day parties in these warehouses in the low bottoms. That's where the Five Dudes Broadways was having it, May 6th, 2012. It was up and everybody was having a good time. Everybody was in attendance, even YG Fly and all the other homies that had paperwork or were deemed to be snitches around that Edwin John murder. Everybody was there. So at this point, off 37th, it said that one of the Toons, I'm pretty sure it was Infant Toon, not Tiny Toon, dips out of the party with his chick, Latoya Jones. And this was a female that stayed in the 50s in the Broadways. It said they was looking for their car to lead a function, and Donovan Hoover, aka Infant Toon, who was 27 at the time, was drunk and seemingly didn't know where he parked. And when Infant Toon got to the corner of 37th and Broadway, multiple dudes walked up on him and banged on him and ended up shooting him 30 times, standing over him right outside of Five Dudes Broadway Hood Day party. And them dudes was said to have been sent by somebody named Crumb from East Coast Crip. And that Infant Toon was in East Coast Hood a couple days prior to that, and some shit that went down, and East Coast was ordered to hit up this Hood Day party on the Five Dudes Broadways. So with a homie being hit 30 times outside the Hood Day, you know what this gonna do to the hood. It's gonna send it all the way up. As soon as this went down, like I said, YG Fly was there. He said orders were, everybody got to report to 53rd that night. Now, he said he slid over to 53rd. He seen everybody hanging out and said he didn't want no part of it and went home. That goes into why niggas wasn't really respecting him and felt like he wasn't a reliable homie. You know what I'm saying? Not everybody in the set got to pick up a gun or do this and that, but the main thing about the set is being there, especially when your homie gets laid out outside the Hood Day, 30 shots, they stood over him, you know who did it. Being there is most important, you know what I'm saying? And YG Fly wanted no parts of that, but everybody ended up meeting up on 53rd and started to put it together, how to get on Six Pack and 5-9 East Coast. And this is when the feds say Tiny Looney, Tiny Ange, Studdabox, Baby Spike, Scooby, and Crook started to put this shit together to make sure Toon's murder didn't go without no get back. Especially with the fact that Latoya Jones, Infant Toon's girlfriend, was Crook's cousin. So everything was real close. So like I said, Toon was killed May 6, 2012 at 1:30 a.m. That same day at 11:45 a.m., it said that a green Suburban hit 59th, 5-9 East Coast Hood. It said that two dudes jumped out, with one of them dudes being Studdabox, and it said that they started getting off on some people that was standing in front of a house over here on 59th. Now, witnesses, of course, matched up Studdabox appearance, and they gave a partial license plate number where it came back that the Suburban was owned by Kevin Campbell, aka Scooby. Now, they did hit somebody over here on 59th. A man did get shot in the arm, but you know, this did not satisfy Broadway. Studdabox was said to be somebody that actually saw Infant Toon's body laying in the street at the Hood Day party a couple hours prior. So you know, tensions were at an all-time high. somebody just getting hit in the arm and surviving was not gonna do. So Tiny Looney, aka Marquis Shaw, again, one of the dudes that was on trial with Tiny Ange and Big Toon, was staying on 89th at the time, outside of the hood, and the feds alleged that he was one of the main drug suppliers of the Broadways, along with T-Dog, Big Sneak, Doughboy, Johnny Leggett, and of course, Lil C'Bone. But the key thing is Tiny Looney already had a big name coming out the Broadways when he was involved in the 2003 murder of Louis Roaches. Now, he did go down for that murder and ended up getting it dropped down to a manslaughter where he served 7 years on it. And that's where it was said where the Broadways, Tiny Looney and his homies was in Hollywood at a club, got into it with Louis Roaches and his homies. And after the club, they slid up on him and aired his whole car out, killing Roaches right there on the scene. And Roaches wasn't confirmed to have been a member of any set beefing with Broadway. But after the shooting, they got into a chase with the people and went down in the vehicle with the murder weapon and all. Somehow he got it dropped down to a manslaughter, and he's back on the streets May 9th, 2012, in the car being the driver of Tiny Ange and his homies going to slide on 5-9 East Coast Hood Day. Now, since he had a name, the feds alleged that he is the start of the indictment. Now, mind you, he's the fourth named defendant, with Lil C'Bone being the lead, Woody being the secondary, but T-Loon is up here at the top playing a major role for the Five Deuce Crips. But after they missed on 59th, Looney is driving, and they ended up spinning to Rimpau and Slauson. Now, Infant Toon's girlfriend, LaToya Jones, was said to be the one that provided the weapons to Studdabox, Tiny Ange, Crip, and Baby Spike. They heard 5-9 was having a party over here outside of a hall on Slauson, and when they got there, Tiny Ange and his co-defendants jumped out and started getting cracking with a Uzi, a 40, and a 4.5, which resulted in William Sherman, who was 37 at the time, getting killed and being considered a member of 5-9 East Coast, being at their hood day. Now, of course, what a lot of people say, he wasn't from East Coast. I don't know. He was at their hood day. We know what's going on. He got caught in the crossfire with Broadway plotting on 5-9. Now, the shooting on Slauson played out a lot different than the move that they pulled on 59th. It said that 5 people in total jumped out and got cracking, and they wanted to make it personal, just like the Coast did when they killed Infant Toon. It said that Baby Spike got so close to the body that he pistol whipped him and got blood on him after they laid him down. And the crazy thing is, even with paperwork, Tiny Choo is said to have also participated in this skit off Slauson. But after Baby Spike got up close, it said that he jumped back into LaToya Jones' car and they slid off, leaving a crazy scene with hella bullets left over here in the 6-0s. But immediately after they killed William Sherman over here on Slauson, Baby Spike is in communication with the rat, Nephew, and tells him everything that went down, every single detail, even how the Uzi jammed when they jumped out on Slauson. And he told the snitch where they kept the guns on 51st at LaToya Jones' house. The snitch immediately goes back to the feds, tells them everything, and they kick in LaToya Jones' door the next day. Gaffles up all the weapons used in the murders, except for Tiny Ange's. Now, Tiny Ange jumped out with the 40, and it said that he kept it on him. Now, Tiny Ange was caught at Lord Kelly's house on tap with the 40. Like I said, they alleged Lord Kelly Crib, who also goes by Lil Rave, his spot, which was deemed the Honeycomb Hideout, the Gremlin Shack, or the White House, served as an armory for 5 Deuce. But it said that Lord Kelly didn't want Tiny Ange at his crib because C'Bone had just got caught with a gun previously over there that was used in a murder. And here Tiny Ange go with another gun over there that was used in a murder. Again, the snitch was documenting all of this shit. But eventually, against what everybody was telling him, Tiny Ange ends up getting caught with the 40 on a traffic stop. But that was after they started plotting on 6 Deuce East Coast Hood Day party. Now, even though they did get their get back over here on Slauson and Rimpau on the 5-9s, Broadway still wasn't satisfied. Again, they homie got hit 30 times. This is when Studdabox started using his people from 7 Trey Gangsta and from UG Block to plot on 6 Deuce Hood Day. So this is what I'm saying about why and how different hood days get lit up. these situations stem from prior incidents, and people are just gonna say, wait, we just gonna wait for their hood day to come out. I got homies from over here, I got family from over here that fuck with these niggas. I'ma wait till my niggas get the drop on it, and we just gonna slide up over there. That's what happens, because hoods rock with other hoods. They gonna invite other hoods to their hood day. 9 times out of 10, it's not just gonna be all your homies, especially when females is involved. You know, your allies is more than welcome to pull up and function. And that's what happened when Fido's Broadway started plotting on June 2nd, 6 Deuce East Coast Hood Day. So Studdabox was in front of the snitch, Nephew, on video recording, talking about how they still want more bloodshed for the murder of Toon at their hood day. He said he was in communication with a female trying to obtain the location for 6 Deuce Hood Day. And him and Tiny Looney were caught on video camera saying how they wanted to take it down. Now, Studdabox was also involved in those robberies of the Asians at their bank. It said that he was a jack of all trades. They had him selling dope, murders, robbery crews. He had followed an Asian woman home from a bank and had tased her in the midst of the robbery as well. So this dude was an extremely active member in this investigation. And the transcript showing Studdabox talking to Tiny Looney showed how he was plotting on the East Side 7 trays to be in attendance, and how he said his little cousin from UG, and he gonna slide that information anyway to him because the UGs and the Rolling Hunters is cool with the neighborhoods and the coast. Now, all this information was on the video camera being recorded by Nephew. He told the police the plan of the get back on 6 Deuce East Coast Hood Day, along with LaToya Jones wanting to get back because she was fucking with Tiny Toon. And this resulted in the police putting extra surveillance and units around 6 Deuce Hood Day and threw Broadway off from their retaliatory shooting at the party. So like I said, with Nephew not cooperating, a lot of things would have went different, and this case wouldn't have been as strong as it was because he was a main player with the Gremlin Ridaz and was involved with all the main niggas from Fido's Broadway. Now after this, everything low-key calmed down in the 50s, and this is when Tiny Choo received his DP. You know, the back and forth murder stopped, the hood days, all that shit, you know, they hood was extremely hot after that. And it seemed like everybody that was on paperwork, they situation had kind of stalled out for a second because they was full-fledged beefing. So after the streets calmed down with the murder beef, they addressed Tiny Choo and served him as DP December 2012. In January 2013, the first wiretap comes out on Lil C'Bone. Again, the head voice of the Gremlin Ridaz.
If a nigga cold squabble, he don't watch his mouth. But that's only in the county streets, we knock him down. From Century to Imperial, that's my stumping grounds. Catch me hanging on the block with a 4-pound.
Dead niggas in this wood, bitch, it's so loud. Me and Foe on a block, but it's ghost town. Hit the county, run your face, don't stroll out. Most important, they ask questions, close your mouth.
Now this whole time, they've been on Lil C'Bone because he's been telling people in the hood about his plans to kill F-Bone and Tiny Choo for snitching on that murder in retaliation on the BloodStone Villians. Now initially, when it all went down, Lil C'Bone had pretty much forced Tiny Choo into his plot of killing F-Bone. Around the time of the DP, Tiny Choo told Lil C'Bone that he would kill F-Bone in order to get back in the good graces of the set and taking out the snitch. Again, like I said, F-Bone had fled to Vegas. He wasn't playing no more games with the hood. He knew his number was up. But Tiny Choo started plotting on driving to Vegas to go take him out. But all the while, Lil C'Bone was already plotting on killing Tiny Choo as well, where he was filling out Deuce Smack, telling him that he wanted to kill Tiny Choo and F-Bone and do it quickly and to make it look like another hood that did it so Broadway wouldn't look like they killing their own homies. He was trying to see how far Deuce Smack was willing to take it with killing these two dudes, and Deuce Smack had replied, you know, lace me up on how to do it so I make sure I do it right without being caught. These were the conversations Lil C'Bone was having about taking these two niggas out. And you know, the feds listening and hearing all this shit from the wiretap and from the snitch, this is what led to them having C'Bone higher up that list as the lead defendant because they felt like he was trying to kill people for doing what they deemed was right and snitching on this murder. Now, like I said, Lil C'Bone was quiet at Tiny Choo's DP, in December 2012, but on January 30th, 2013, on 43rd and Hoover, Tiny Choo takes 2 bullets to his head, losing his life in the 40s. Now this was perfect for Lil C'Bone. Like I said, he was already caught telling people how he wanted to make it look like it was another hood that had killed either Tiny Choo or F-Bone, so the 50s didn't look grimy. But it seemed like everybody already knew that the backdoor took place because Tiny Choo's family tried to say that specific dudes from Broadway couldn't come to the funeral. Lil C'Bone pressed the issue. He was caught on tap telling somebody Tiny Choo's family ain't got no say-so and saying if Broadway could come to the funeral or not, and bogarted their way into Tiny Choo funeral. Now, I believe some people was probably allowed and it was cool, but like I said, it seemed like Tiny Choo's family knew what happened, that a backdoor was present. But at this time, Lil C'Bone tried to throw a battery in niggas' backs, trying to say it was the 40s that killed they homie. Now, the same day Tiny Choo was killed, everybody went back to the White House, Lord Kelly crib, and started to gear up. And the FBI did another raid that day as well. But Lil C'Bone had the hood really pressing on that the 40s was responsible for killing Tiny Choo. And even to this day, even after everything was said and laid out, that case has still remained unsolved. But these are the facts that were alleged on the stand and with the wiretaps, but the people just couldn't glue it together. Now at this same time, the feds also got Lil C'Bone shooting at CHP officers. This dude was also another active member and a big voice of Fadu's Broadway, but he was also in direct communication with the Snitches. And unbeknownst to him, the feds was clocking every move he was doing and accused him of hunting down his own homies. Now, Lil C'Bone was in communication with the 40s about the murder of Tiny Choo, and the 40s told Lil C'Bone that they had nothing to do with killing Tiny Choo, and they wouldn't take responsibility for his murder. Even though both of these hoods is already beefing, the 40s wouldn't take responsibility for the murder. And Tiny Choo's family stated that they feel like the Broadways did it for his cooperation with the police. Lil C'Bone somewhat made a response at what Tiny Choo's family had claimed with it being the Broadways, and said that if the Broadways wanted to do it, it would have been done a long time ago. Mind you, he was killed a full year after the alleged paperwork came out on the murder against the BloodStone Villians. So Lil C'Bone had used that time to excuse the Broadways from the murder. And then they went to have a meeting with the 40s where he said he wanted Deuce Pound to be at the meeting with the 40s for backup because they was gearing up to go to war with the 40s over the situation. Now, even though Tiny Choo family said they couldn't come to the funeral, Lil C'Bone on the Broadway still raised money for Tiny Choo's funeral. And at this time, he made a statement to somebody right after this murder that he felt like he was under federal investigation. Now, of course, once these wiretaps came into play, everything got turned up and more confidential informants started coming out the woodwork. Like I said, Nephew and his wife Meme was already snitching, Lil E snitching, YG Fly snitching, Sweet T snitching, and the feds got to the point where they was doing anything. At one point, they used Nephew to get a hold of a high caliber rifle from one of his homies. After they set up to buy the rifle with Nephew, they staged this whole elaborate plan where they bought the helicopter out and staged the police chase for Nephew to go down, and made sure they did it in front of everybody at Broadway just so they can get a hold of the weapon in the controlled buy, because they didn't want it to seem like somebody sold something to Nephew and all of a sudden the feds got the gun and he didn't go down. They had to make sure Broadway watched him go down with the helicopter and the full police pursuit to make the story believable. Nephew and his wife also got video surveillance, and they put the drop on another hood day on the Broadways in 2014 in Vegas, where Broadway was at a park. The feds also set up shop inside of the park, had a picnic while watching and taking pictures of Fadu celebrating their hood day at the park. Again, this is a RICO. They want to further prove that Broadway is an organized enterprise out here in the streets. Now, with Nephew being a highly respected member of the Gremlin Ridaz, even though it was said that he was in bad standing at different times because he wouldn't do certain things that certain homies was asking for him to do. And this is when his wife, Meme or Meme Sawyer, again, who was a part of the Gremlets, started to bring the feds into how Woody was in control and how he was leading different homies, including homegirls, and show how to conduct themselves in the set. She said that Woody wanted Nephew to kill one of their homies, and Nephew didn't want to do it. And in turn, Nephew's brother was hit by somebody from Broadway, and it's alleged that Broadway paid for the hit on Nephew's brother. Now, similar to Nephew, Meme was paid as well for being a federal informant. Not as much as him, but she got 15 racks out of the situation. And she also wore video camera and audio recording devices in the female meeting. So when Woody got out, he started pressing the line on the females for not putting it down in the hood the way they supposed to. He made it mandatory for taking care of and sending niggas pictures who was locked down for the set, making sure that niggas was collecting money for fallen homies' headstones, and making sure everybody was representing the set the right way. He found out that during them back and forth Hood Day murders, niggas from Broadway wasn't hanging outside, and he felt like that was unacceptable. And in a time of war, niggas had to be frontlining, but frontlining in the right spots, not hanging out in front of the old lady's house on the block while niggas is coming through sliding on them, but hanging out in the correct locations, still making a presence felt in they set, to not make it look like they set wasn't being patrolled and niggas was scared of frontlining the set. This is what got Woody into that secondary position in this indictment, because he did display true leadership qualities. And along with Big Rave, they started to implement a more militant structure in the Broadway hood. But the thing is, the Gremlin Ridaz didn't like to have too many instructions, so this is where the clashes was going on, especially with Nephew being from the GRs. But even though the Gremlin Ridaz like to play on their own field, niggas from Broadway had to respect that shit. She said the Gremlin Ridaz would go slide and everybody would stand on 53rd and wait for the helicopter to come out. When it came out, they would know that the job was done properly. So this is what I was talking about with YG Fly saying the Gremlin Ridaz get more leeway and they get more respect because they get their hands dirty. Now, Meme says she joined Broadway in about 92, and she was also one of them ones moving them packs out of state. Like I said, they was operating in different states with the work. And Knockout, William Lucas, is who got her into the set of Broadway, which is her godfather. And he also went down in this indictment. So what we see is a lot of close-knit family members and people and these informants snitching on their own family, man. Now, like I said, aside from Tiny Ange, Tiny Looney, and Big Toon taking it to trial, Woody went to trial, and this is where we seen Lil E take the stand, also putting the blame and leadership on Woody, Big Rave, and Bugs. And he said he's a part of the baby gremlins, not the Gremlin Ridaz. But he was testifying, of course, for leniency, another cooperating defendant. And he said as soon as the feds kicked in the door on this operation, he started cooperating before a deal was even put on the table. Again, one of them dudes that said they was just tired of the lifestyle, and Antoine Collins, aka Lil E, also got a green light on him for taking a stand on his homies. Now the thing is, with Tiny Ange, he tried to play a different role. Like I said, he initially went to trial with his homies. Day 7, all of a sudden, his name is not on the docket. He backs out of trial. He then makes a plea deal with them people and says that his family really wanted him to make the plea deal because they didn't want to see him lose trial. But the key thing is, his case was actually not as bad as he thought it was, because after the murder of William Sherman on Slauson and Rimpau, the confidential informant didn't have an audio device recording when he got the details about that murder. So he didn't fully have Tiny Ange all the way glued to it, but he did go down with the 40 that was used in the murder. But in all, his case did seem to be somewhat beatable. I don't think he had to take the route that he did and still eventually get washed and get the green light on his ass. Because the thing is, when he backed out of trial, like I said, he left his homies for dead. You got 2 niggas that you went to trial with. That shit ugly. All of a sudden, you take a plea deal. The jury probably looking like, shit, what's really going on? They had that nigga so spooked. In the middle of trial, he backed out. I ain't never seen nothing like that before. And Tiny Ange tried to play the card of the specifics of his deal was that he wasn't cooperating with the police, but he admitted guilt, which further implicated his homies and admitted their guilt as well in the whole scenario, because he wasn't the only one on them murders and other people had already copped out. so it left Tiny Looney and Big Toon to dry out in trial. He blamed his defense team because the way the government explained his plea deal, his homies looked at him like he was snitching, and he went on a hunger strike. But then he wrote a letter to the judge saying how the Broadways kind of forced him into this lifestyle based on how they treat Hispanic members in the neighborhood. He just went out all the way bad for being the respected and reputable member that he was, a part of the Gremlin Ridaz. But either way, this dude was already sealed up because them confidential informants was taking a stand. But the crazy thing is, with Nephew and his wife Meme, they had been cooperating since 2011. Like I said, Nephew making almost 100 racks. It was definitely 100 racks between the both of them. While they was both cooperating, they both ended up catching an attempted murder case and being kicked out of the snitch program with the FBI. Crazy shit. They both were terminated as informants in May 2013 for a drug deal gone bad, attempted murder type bullshit, but their cooperations as informants were still used against everybody from Broadway in this indictment. Now, even though they weren't charged with attempted murder, they shit got dropped down to lesser charges. Nephew still got 15 years after cooperating as an informant on his homies. But what we see now, a lot of these cases didn't wrap up till about 2018, 2019, even though this indictment dropped out in 2014. But a lot of these dudes have done their time, came home, and is back participating in the right way in their community. But other dudes, of course, is still serving their bid in the feds. Woody got 180 months, but he is slated to touch back down next year. Tiny Looney, though, who the feds said was one of the most violent and feared members involved in the Broadway murder conspiracies, they hit him with 420 months with a release date set for December 2047. Tyron Martinez, Lil C'Bone, who they alleged was backdooring homies and the leader of the Gremlin Ridaz, 262 months, release date 2033. Now Joshua Perez, aka Tiny Angel, even though he dipped out on his co-defendants in the middle of trial, admitted guilt, had many letters from his family pleading his case, he still got washed with 360 months. Currently in Atwater right now with a release date set for 2041. Now, as recently as March of this year, he was still sending mail to Big Rave. I don't know if that's him or his legal team, I don't know. But again, everything turned out bad for Tiny Ange. OG Big Rave is out. Studdabox out. Lord Kelly, aka Lil Rave, who was running the White House, release date for 2027. Baby Spike, who the feds say pistol whipped William Sherman body when they did that on 5-9 East Coast Hood Day. His release date set for 2027. He was sentenced to 200 months in the feds. Andre Williams, the snitch, YG Fly. Of course, he took a plea deal and got up out of there. His cousin Big Sneak and Fly are also back participating in society. The other two main snitches, Timothy Sawyer and his wife Meme Sawyer. Like I said, they was kicked out of the cooperation program as federal informants for catching the case. They went to serve state time. As recently as 2022, they was both on an appeal trying to get their sentence reduced. And as of today, both of them snitches is still walking around in the real world. Baby Dice, whose name was brought up in Tiny Choo DP, as also having paperwork on him. He was released in 2022. F-Bone, who ran to Vegas when the feds told him he was bad and Broadway wanted his head. He's serving federal probation out in Vegas, back outside. Wody, the first person to take it to trial in this indictment, ended up getting washed up 360 months with a release date set for 2040. Baby Ange, also back in the streets. And Crook, sentenced to 216 months with a release date set for 2029. And something that you don't find a lot of, Big Toon, who was on trial with Tiny Looney and Tiny Ange. Now, he worked a 9-to-5 job, took it to trial, and ended up getting a sentence of 60 days total. Now, he served 15 days when he initially went down, got out on bond. After trial, had to serve an additional 45 days and was able to enter the community after trial, man. It's very rare that you're going to see a 60-day sentence after you take it to trial on a RICO case, man. And there are two people that are resting in peace that were a part of this case. OG Bear, Rufus Minifield, and Doughboy Robert Pitts. But overall, this is what happened when the feds got up with Fido's Broadway Gangsta Crip. Like I said previously, almost 40% of their hood went down. The feds try to take them out for good. Broadway is changing their political stance with trucing them with East Coast. A lot of these dudes back on the street, and this is the outcome of these RICO cases that's hitting the city, man. But nonetheless, y'all, make sure y'all stay tapped in with the channel. We coming back with some more heat. We know this was a large video. It took us some time to put this shit together, but we coming with some heat real soon. It's the best hood channel on YouTube. Rap news, street politics. We out.